Good evening. You're joining with Spotlight on ChannelEye. There's a new buzzword out there known as the price control, which is being spoken by a lot of people without knowing the actual context of it. It's very damaging if you don't know the context and still speak about it and also advocate about it. Because in definition, price control means there is a price set, a maximum price and also a minimal price known as the ceiling and also the flow of a certain price. If the government does not want the price to fluctuate beyond those limits regardless of the quality, quantity, supply and also demand of these prices and services as well. But Sri Lanka is slowly getting rid of this sort of long-standing and regulating mandate, or rather the dictum. But in the run of doing this, we want to know whether this is going to be a bad factor for the citizens and the consumers out there. And to ask these questions, it's important that we ask these questions directly from an expert or a researching personnel. And today we have invited exactly one of those. Joining with us today is Tiffahny Hoole, a researcher at Advocata Institute, an NLB graduate of from the University of London, United Kingdom, and also an assistant lecturer at Royal Institute, Colombo. Simply said, a legal professional who knows a lot about these price ranges as well. Good evening, good to have you.
Good evening, Varuna.
Tiffahny, so as a start, let me ask you about how this price control is going to affect us, and the reason why it is imposed. Is it because of a legal, some economic crisis? Do you think it reflects the economic status of the country?
Absolutely, Varuna. So let me just sort of dissect about what the economic crisis is right now, and then we'll sort of link the price controls and what it plays in this economic crisis. So currently in Sri Lanka, our debt GDP ratio is at over 101% in Sri Lanka,
right.
And our gross foreign reserves are at 2.8 billion,
yes.
which is only enough for importation for the next 2 months.
Two months?
Yes.
Wow.
So we definitely don't have enough money in the current country, and the economy is just not doing so well. So ever since independence, this is one of the biggest economic crises we have ever had, and for the longest time the government has imposed this thing called a price control. And when we look at the price control right now, as you said very correctly, a price control is a mechanism where the government intervenes in a market economy so as to protect a consumer or a seller. So like you said, you spoke about price ceilings in the market, and that is used as a tool to prevent the price from reaching something that's unaffordable for a consumer. So you can't have a price that's above the price that has been prescribed by government. And then you have a price floor, which is a situation in which take for instance a farmer. If he or she was to sell his crops to a middle person, the middle person can't charge a price below the price prescribed by the government. So from a very broader perspective, from a consumer and a seller, this looks like a good thing. But in reality, it distorts the market. And as opposed to making things more affordable, what's happening in reality now is by having shortages in the economy, long queues, black market sales, and low quality products. So this reverse of the decision on price controls is definitely the struggle by the government to see what is either accessible or affordable.
Right. So in that case, do you think the price control, this was imposed only because of this crisis, or do you think there are other factors also?
There are definitely other factors, Varuna, that play a big role in this situation, and I think we would get a better perspective when we look at things in a global scale. Currently, world prices for various commodities like fuel and milk powder have been rising at an unprecedented rate.
That's right.
Currently, the crude oil price is at around $82 US dollars. And another reason why this factor is because importation has become so expensive. Custom clearances, duties and everything is so much more expensive than it was, and this was exacerbated because of COVID-19. And the third reason is And the third reason is because of the dollar depreciation in the country, and which means that sellers and suppliers would have to buy more for less.
More for less, exactly. Yeah, because you don't have enough money to spend,
Exactly.
and also the amount of money you have to pay for a unit would be expensive.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, that makes quite a lot of sense. So how is this going to affect the the market and the supply demand equilibrium?
Okay. So just to explain to you, this is a really good question in terms of understanding the theory about the market economy, really. I think I feel like there's a huge misconception in profit and the role of profit it plays in a market economy by the majority of us, including including a lot of us, right? So profit is usually perceived as this thing where, we're reaping benefits from people who can't afford something, and we're getting something that we don't really deserve. But in reality, what a profit does is it signals to the seller that their input and the efforts that they put to supply that good is now positive, which incentivizes that supplier to produce and supply more of those goods. And that will bring about more people to supply that, to meet those demands.
Exactly.
So what that would do at the end of the day is have more competitors in the market, leading to competitive prices.
And high quality.
High quality, competitive prices, which lead to a supply and demand market equilibrium, lowering the prices down. And that is like the core theory of the market theory right now.
Oh, great. Okay. So in your point of view, how long is it going to take for us? Like I'm pretty sure like these days we are struggling. I know that because the price restrictions have been taken out. But then again, for us to see equilibrium where it will be very affordable for everybody, how long will that take?
I think, Varuna, we can't, sort of give like a generalization to things. I think it will definitely depend on the type of product that we're speaking about, and also different other factors as to whether the government is going to enable more competitors into the market, whether they're going to enable more people to sort of compete in these various industries where these essential goods are supplied. So definitely this is a one step in the right direction based on the government's decision to remove price controls. However, there are things that need to be facilitated in order to supplement this decision they've taken. So removing barriers to trade, really enabling more suppliers to come into the market is something that needs to be done. But it's very important to warn consumers that in the short run, there's going to be a lot of spikes. Yes, but I think that at this point we weren't doing so well with the price control either, right?
Yes.
So the question was, are we going to be able to have price controls at a decent price where there's nothing in the market, or are we going to have the products in the market at a price that's a bit higher and with the hope and confidence that it's going to lower someday?
Right. So then in that case, now this is like an indefinite time frame. We can't be exactly quite sure about that.
Of course.
So do you think something about producing our own goods, will that sort of heal the situation, at least, like patch the situation momentarily?
Are you speaking of self-sufficient economy? So this concept of self-sufficiency has been really glamorized in Sri Lanka. I mean, when we were...
I know. We have been speaking about
self-sufficiency. I mean, I'm sure when you studied history, we spoke about our irrigation system in Sri Lanka, and we spoke about how well our system worked on our own when we didn't have trade, right?
Agriculture as well.
Exactly, exactly. So this concept is quite outdated. I mean, we need to ask ourselves, are we going to be able to produce everything, and does that enable us to produce goods at the lowest price? So let's take, for instance, Singapore. In 2019, they topped the global food security index.
Wow. Okay.
Across the globe. And this was not because they were producing everything and anything in the market. It was because they were able to source and diversify their supplies from different parts of the world. And if one failed, they got something else from the other, from another source. So that is basically how trade works, right? We aren't supposed to be producing everything because we don't have the capacity to. I think a good example that we could look into is the dairy industry in Sri Lanka. I know that there's some level of pride we have for our milk industry, and I understand that, I completely do. But the reality, like if you look at the facts, our current production of milk only meets the demand of 40% locally, and that remaining 60% is outsourced through trade. So we get all our imported trade from countries like Australia and New Zealand, right? And they are able to compete with such low prices because they really embrace trade. They're really connected with the global markets, which means that their production is so efficient, and obviously meaning geographically they're much bigger in terms of grazing cows, and it's just a different. They have a massive land mass. So we need to accept the fact that there's only so much we can do. I mean, if we embrace trade in such a way that we move away from this self-sufficient principle, we'll be able to compete in the market on those same prices. And I think this is a very debatable argument because
the production cost could be higher than the import cost. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So I think that's how protectionist policies come into place. But in reality, in the long term at least, our local producers are going to ask themselves, if we are not going to be able to sell our goods in the market due to these low prices of imported goods, what are we doing wrong? Currently in Sri Lanka, a cow in Sri Lanka only produces around over 4 liters of milk per day. Globally, it's 28 liters. So we are definitely doing something wrong in terms of our efficiency and productivity.
So it's not the cow's fault.
It's not the cow's fault. It's our system. It's the manufacturing system, and we need to figure out a way how we can make it more efficient. And if we can't, then we might as well, embrace it through trade. Because at the end of the day, a consumer wants something at the lowest price at the best quality.
That's right. Yeah, I think quality always matters, because sometimes most of us, we have been just being okay with receiving low quality products. I think what's really important is to look at the quality at the same time. Right. So when it comes to price control, do you think the government, I mean, in your point of view, and also the gathered knowledge you have so far, do you think government could have done something different rather than having a price control, like a dismissal of price control to overcome this economic situation? Because at the end, I believe it's all because of the economy.
Of course. Varuna, I actually have a question for you in terms of this.
Yes.
If your temperature was going up, what would be your first go-to? What would be your response to a high temperature?
I would probably self-diagnose and take a paracetamol, maybe.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to take your thermometer and sort of change the change the thermometer rates, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Same thing with price controls. If your prices are going up, then you're not going to change the prices. You're going to figure out, why are these prices going up and what can I do to fix it?
Right. Okay, so there's another completely different segment that is affected right now. This is actually the construction, because we saw cement prices shooting up or about to shoot up. Now, the construction industry, what do you think is going to happen to that? Because that's also a consumer, which is like essential. You need housing, obviously. So how do you think it's going to affect?
It is a very sensitive area. I mean, housing, and I mean, it's every average middle income or any person's dream to build a house before they die, right?
Yes. So
in terms of construction's cost has always been very high in Sri Lanka. It's not only just the purchase of land anymore. So the material that is used for construction is so high because of importation restrictions and importation taxes. And in addition to this, there's a price control on cement, which was removed. But what we're going to expect, I'm going to say to the consumers, that prices are going to go up, spiral upwards. And I mean, in the short run, it's going to cause different projects, especially on a small scale, to sort of have a halt, definitely. because cement is going to be a little bit more unaffordable than it was before. But
wouldn't people stop buying or limit buying the cement products if it goes up, any product that goes up, if it becomes unaffordable? I mean, sometimes you would buy like three or four milk packets per day per month for a household. But then again, when the prices go up, you will kind of like satisfy with just 2 packets, right? So in that case, isn't the producer getting affected in that sense as well by not receiving enough money?
So Varun, that's actually a really good question. But the reality is that there are always going to be consumers that are going to so we shouldn't be looking at this process of prices in like a long-term year or so, right?
Okay.
We're going to look at things in a different segment way.
Right. Okay.
So what will actually happen in economics, at least, is that when you allow the prices to spiral upwards, people are going to end up purchasing more because it's available, right? And that will cause the price to spiral upwards. And then what will happen is, if the prices are going upwards, other people are going to be like, look, these suppliers are making profit because they're supplying this certain good now which doesn't have a price control anymore. And they will enter into the market. And that entrance into the market will enable the prices to go down.
Right. So which means there will be also more competitors.
Exactly.
That can also cause the prices to go down.
Exactly. The competition and creating that ecosystem in Sri Lanka is crucial to having good prices in Sri Lanka. And I think, let's take for instance gas in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
I mean, cooking is something so essential in Sri Lanka in every household, and predominated by gas, right?
Yeah,
LP gas. But in Sri Lanka, we only have 2 firms running the show, right? Who produce all this gas and supply it to all the households in Sri Lanka. And what that means is that if you remove the price controls, these 2 firms are able to, use kind of price their product at any point without having to feel that level of competition. And that is going to be a backlash in what the government decision, government's decision right now. Because what it's going to do is, it's going to enable 2 firms to dictate prices and not enable the consumers to afford it. But what needs to happen is, from the government point of view, is that they need to enable more suppliers to come into the market and supply these for us. So then there's competition in terms of price. If you have the lowest price, you will be able to, there'll be more demand for the lowest price. And the other competitors will have to bring their price down as well.
Right. Okay. So apart from this letting in more competitors or more importers or producers into the country, what do you think are the suggestible methods that the government can look at to ease for the provide some sort of a satisfaction for the consumers and the suppliers as well at the same time?
So right now, I think the best way, I mean, this is deregulation. We're in the process of deregulation.
Yeah.
And in order to make sure deregulation happens smoothly, I think the government needs to take very careful, calculated decisions in how they deregulate. That's one thing, because we don't want to suddenly feel the burden of paying twice the prices of a milk powder packet than we were before, right? And the other thing is that if you look at the way businesses run right now, it's quite a tedious task to get into a business in Sri Lanka, So, I mean, if you look at other countries, like getting into a business is just a matter of just going online and just getting something done and registering something. So I think what we need to facilitate in this process is enable more people to and encourage more people to come into these markets and supply goods where profit is being made.
Exactly. So now, since the prices of many items is about to go up, I would say, because of this price limitation dismissal, I think it's also very important that the government also looks at the minimal wage of many people. But then again, at the same time, that is something to do with their own efficiency, because people earn in their different matters are different. Because there are so many people who are earning by the day, there are so many people also earning by the month. But it also depends on their efficiency. But again, this is something to discuss later on as well when it comes to minimal wage. Right. So we're looking at the next this coming year. How do you think the consumer is going to be affected now when it comes to selections of products and the availability of products? And the pricing of products is obviously going to go up. apart from the cement and other construction material, if you're looking at household items, do you think people will find a difficult time in the front?
So it depends on what the price control was at the time and what is being released now, right? There's only a selected few items that have sort of removed this price control on selected items. So in terms of the impact on a consumer, it is definitely going to feel like an additional burden to a consumer. We're not going to deny that. We need to face the facts. And but what I think we need to tell the consumers is that, look, if you stay put and you kind of brace yourselves for these few months, we are going to see a better tomorrow. Because right now, with price controls, what we're seeing is we're seeing queues in lines to get just a packet of milk. We're seeing hoarding, where people keep the stocks and then sell it at really high prices. And then we also see black market sales, and we also see bad quality goods being produced in the market, which is not something desirable at all.
Yeah.
And especially in a pandemic, we want good quality products to keep us as well, right? So at this point, what we are going to, the argument is that is it accessibility or affordability right now, and that I think the government is in a position to strike that balance.
Yeah, and also when it comes to the importation of items, we are having a dollar deficiency and dollar reserve deficiency as well at the same time. And also, you mentioned that self-sufficiency, or at least producing something within the country, might not be the best when it comes to tackling this situation. But what if we make something? Do you think that, I mean, there can be so many those who are self-employed who are actually currently looking at options and who are already creating products that are already in the market, maybe in a smaller scale, maybe in a smaller quantity, but in a higher quality as well. So what kind of advice do you think you will have to give to them, to the public, in a producer's point of view? Do they have to continue making them, or should they just give up? No?
Or import them, are you saying?
Yeah.
So currently, I'm not going to deny that importation is quite expensive, and there is no doubt that diversifying producers into different areas of businesses is a good thing in Sri Lanka. So definitely, I would say go for it. But if there are chances where you're competing with imported prices and which are lower than yours, it is because they have a greater economies of scale, which means that because they're producing such high amounts, they're able to produce at low prices.
Right.
So if you aren't able to meet those prices and compete with those prices, you might be in a disadvantageous situation.
Right. So it's a part that you have to treat very carefully when it comes to price changes, and getting into the water when it comes to the market is also very important, but then again also something that you have to be very careful about, as you mentioned. Right, so on that note, we are going to conclude today's program. Thank you, Tiffahny, so much for coming in.
Thanks so much
and joining me in the program. And we also wish you all the best with all your researches that are going on, because it's essential that people like you, young people like you, conduct researches like this to strengthen the backbone, the economic backbone of the country. So on that note, we'll be coming back next week with another episode of insightful discussion on Spotlight. Till then, have a good night.